Safe journey, my prince! We will wait for you!
When Prince Elyndar left the palace to study abroad, the entire kingdom rejoiced, especially the noble ladies whose hopes of becoming his bride burned brightly. But when he returned, the joy turned to shock. What truly happened to the prince? Sit back and be moved by a werewolf romance that tests love, loyalty, and the heart.
The palace may have had everything, but certainly not true love, as it was not that common, and where true love existed, it was never noticed or desired. Prince Elyndar Nightcrown was admired by all. As heir to the throne, he was surrounded by attention wherever he went. Noble ladies competed openly for his presence, bringing gifts, offering loyalty, speaking eagerly of the future. They smiled often, praised him freely, and made their intentions unmistakable. To the kingdom, it looked like devotion. To Elyndar, it was simply noise. He accepted the admiration because it was expected of him, not because it moved him. The gestures felt rehearsed, the affection predictable. Everyone loved the idea of him, the prince, the future Alpha King, not the man beneath the title. Still, he never questioned it openly. There was no reason to. This was how royal life worked. While the noble ladies surrounded him, life continued quietly beyond their circle. At the edges of the palace moved servants whose names were rarely remembered. Among them was an Omega girl who watched without hope of being seen. Isyra Emberfall had noticed Prince Elyndar long before he ever noticed her. She admired him in silence, never expecting acknowledgement. Her feelings were not born of ambition or desire for status. She loved him simply as he was, even though she knew such love had no place in her world. When duty brought him near, she kept her distance. When her gaze lingered too long, he noticed, and his response was always cold. Sharp words, dismissive looks, reminders of her position. He never wondered why she watched him. To Elyndar, she was only a servant. The palace continued its daily rhythm, laughter, promises, admiration filling its halls. The prince remained surrounded by those who claimed affection, while the only love that asked for nothing stayed hidden in plain sight. And so, without realizing it, Prince Elyndar stood at the center of everything, desired by many, loved by none except one, and even the one lived in the shadow.
Chapter 2. Isyra lived a life built on quiet. Each day followed the same pattern: service, obedience, restraint. She moved through the palace without drawing attention, completing her duties with care, never expecting praise or notice. That was the life of a servant. That was her place. Yet within that quiet life lived a feeling she could not command away. She loved Prince Elyndar Nightcrown. Not because of his title, not because of the power waiting for him. She loved him as a man, through what little she was allowed to see. The way he listened more than he spoke, the distance he kept even from those who surrounded him, the faint heaviness he carried despite all the admiration. She never imagined a future with him, never allowed herself such thoughts. Loving him was something she carried alone, carefully hidden, never spoken aloud. When duty brought her into his presence, she was careful, her eyes lowered, her steps measured. Still, there were moments when restraint failed, when her gaze lifted a second too long, when she lingered just a little beyond necessity. Those were the moments he noticed her. His response was never kind. "Do not stare," he said once, his voice sharp and dismissive. Another time, a look, cold and irritated, sent her retreating without a word. He never asked why she watched him. He never considered what lived behind her silence. To him, she was only an Omega servant who had forgotten her place. Each rejection settled quietly inside, painful but accepted. Isyra never defended herself, never explained. Love, she understood, did not entitle her to understanding in return. So she adjusted. She learned to look away sooner, to stand farther back, to make herself smaller than she already was. Loving him, she realized, meant ensuring she never became a presence he would need to acknowledge. And so she loved him as she lived, silently, carefully, unseen. Chapter 3. The conversation took place in private, away from the noise of the court. Alpha King Elyndar Nightcrown did not raise his voice. He never needed to. His presence alone commanded attention, and his words carried the weight of experience rather than authority. He spoke to his son about love, not in lessons or commands, but in caution. "There are women who admire crowns," he said calmly, "and women who admire the men who wear them. The two are not the same." Elyndar listened, respectful but distant. He had heard variations of such warnings before, royal concerns, fatherly advice. To him they felt unnecessary. He had never lacked affection, never lacked loyalty, at least, on the surface. Valric did not argue. He did not press. Instead, he spoke briefly of the past, not in detail, not in bitterness, only enough to make his meaning clear, enough to suggest that admiration could be convincing and still be false. "I realized too late," the Alpha King said quietly. "I would not wish the same for you." Elyndar nodded, acknowledging the words without fully accepting them. His world had never given him reason to doubt the devotion surrounding him. The warning felt distant, almost theoretical. Soon after, the conversation ended, and the Alpha King left to the council chamber to make the announcement. Prince Elyndar Nightcrown would be leaving the kingdom to study abroad, to prepare himself for the role that awaited him, to return in time as the ruler his people expected. The chamber celebrated the decision. Noble ladies spoke eagerly of waiting. Promises were made with confidence. Elyndar accepted them all without question. And somewhere within the palace walls, a warning had been spoken, heard, but not yet understood. Chapter 4. The day Prince Elyndar Nightcrown left the kingdom was marked by celebration. The palace gates were crowded with well-wishers. Noble ladies stood close, offering smiles filled with promise and patience. "We will wait," one said with confidence. "Write to us," another added, already certain of her place in his future. Elyndar accepted their words with a nod, neither encouraging them nor discouraging them. When the time came, he mounted his horse and rode out without looking back. The palace slowly returned to its rhythm. Days passed, then months, then years. Life went on. For the noble ladies, waiting became a performance. They spoke often of the prince, of how much they missed him, of how the future would begin the moment he returned. Their affection remained loud, even in his absence. For Isyra Emberfall, absence was something else entirely. At first, she found herself looking for him out of habit, expecting his presence in familiar corridors, listening for a voice that would no longer be there. Each time, the realization returned quietly. He is gone. She told herself it was for the best. Distance, she hoped, would loosen the hold her feelings had over her. She focused on her duties, filled her days with work, and trained herself not to imagine his return. "Forget him," she whispered to herself more than once. "He was never yours to begin with." And slowly, painfully, she learned to live with the truth. Her love did not disappear, but it grew quieter, buried beneath acceptance rather than healed by time. The palace changed little. Seasons passed, new servants came, others left. The name Elyndar Nightcrown was still spoken with admiration, still wrapped in expectation. Until one night, without warning, everything shifted. Long after the palace had gone silent, a small procession passed through the gates under the cover of darkness. There were no celebrations, no crowd, no announcements. Only guarded footsteps and hurried whispers. By morning, the kingdom would awaken to news that no one expected. Prince Elyndar Nightcrown had returned, and nothing about him was as it should have been. Chapter 5. The Prince Who Returned Dying. The prince was brought into the palace at night. No trumpet announced his arrival, no crowd waited at the gates, only the hurried movement of guards and servants breaking the stillness as Elyndar Nightcrown was carried inside, his body unmoving, his skin pale beneath the torchlight. By dawn, the silence had shattered. "He's dying." The words spread through the palace like smoke, quiet at first, then uncontrollable. Servants whispered in corridors. Noble families sent messengers in haste. Physicians were summoned, dismissed, and summoned again. Elyndar lay confined to his chambers, weak, breath shallow, eyes rarely open. When he did stir, it was only briefly, just enough to convince anyone watching that time was running out. The Alpha King addressed the court before the sun reached its height. "My son's condition worsens," King Vaelric Nightcrown announced, his voice steady despite the tension in the hall. "The physicians agree, his strength fades by the day." A murmur swept through the nobles. "For this reason," the king continued, "Prince Elyndar must marry immediately." Shock followed silence. A wife, the healers claimed, would stabilize him. A mate bond would anchor his fading life. The kingdom needed an heir secured before it was too late. Fear turned quickly into opportunity. By mid-morning, the palace buzzed with renewed devotion. Noble ladies arrived dressed in soft colors, voices lowered, eyes filled with what looked like concern, and something more calculating beneath it. "He needs love now more than ever," one said gently. "I have always cared for him," another insisted. Outside the prince's chamber, they waited. Inside, Elyndar lay still, eyes closed, his breathing shallow enough to sell the lie. The guards stepped aside, the doors opened, and the first noble lady entered the prince's chamber. Chapter 6. The first woman did not stay long. She approached the bed slowly, her steps cautious, her smile trembling as she took in Elyndar's condition. The weakness, the stillness, the fragility that stripped him of all princely glow. She murmured a few words of sympathy, touched nothing, promised prayers, and left. The second stayed even less. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with fear. She spoke of family obligations, of uncertainty, of the future being unclear. The third did not bother pretending. "I'm not strong enough for this," she whispered, already stepping back. One by one they came, and one by one they went. Each visit followed the same pattern: shock, hesitation, retreat. Love that once sounded certain now hid behind careful excuses. Futures once loudly imagined suddenly felt too heavy to carry. From his bed, Elyndar lengthened. Behind closed eyes he heard it all, the distance in their voices, the relief in their steps as they left his chamber untouched. By evening, the truth was undeniable. The room meant for a future Luna stood empty. Outside the chamber, murmurs shifted. She would ruin her life. He won't last long. Who would choose this? The guards remained still. The servants lowered their eyes. And in that silence, after the last noble lady turned away, a quiet figure stepped forward. Isyra Emberfall. She did not dress differently. She did not hesitate. She did not ask how long he had left. She simply entered the chamber. Chapter 7.
Rest now, the fever will pass.
I feel so weak.
Shh, I'm here.
Isyra did not announce herself. She simply took the cloth, dipped it in warm water, and wiped the sweat from Elyndar's brow as though she had done it 1,000 times before. Her movements were careful, practiced, almost reverent. "You should rest," she said softly. Her voice held no pity, no fear, only concern. She fed him slowly, waiting between each sip. When his hands trembled, she steadied the cup without comment. When his breathing grew shallow, she stayed, long after other servants had been dismissed. Night deepened. Still, Isyra remained. "You don't have to stay," Elyndar murmured at last, testing her. She shook her head. "No, someone should." That was all. Days passed that way. She slept little, ate less. She asked for nothing, not gratitude, not acknowledgement, not promises. She spoke to him of small things, of weather, of palace routines, of silence that did not demand replies. From the bed, Elyndar watched her, watched how she flinched when he coughed, how she smiled only when she thought he was asleep, how she never once looked at him like a prince. Guilt came first, then confusion, then something far more dangerous. "Isyra," he said one evening, his voice low, unsteady. She turned instantly. "Yes, my prince?" He hesitated. For the first time since his return, fear crept into his chest, not of death, but of truth. "Tell me," he asked quietly, "if I asked you to bind your life to mine, even like this?" He stopped. The question hung between them, heavy and irreversible, and for the first time, Elyndar Nightcrown was afraid of the answer. Chapter 8. Elyndar did not sleep that night. The chamber was quiet, yet his thoughts were loud, pressing, relentless. When dawn thinned the darkness, he finally spoke. "Isyra." She looked up from where she sat beside the bed, already awake. She always was. "If I marry you," he said slowly, "it will not be as a prince who can protect you. It will be as a man who may not live long." Her answer came without pause. "I know." He searched her face, waiting for fear to surface. It never did. "You would lose everything," he continued. "Freedom, youth, a future others would call full." "I would gain you," she said simply. Silence followed, thick, sacred. "If I die," he asked, his voice barely steady. "Will you regret choosing me?" Isyra stepped closer, lowering herself so they were eye to eye. "I will grieve," she said, "but I will never regret loving you." Something broke in him then. Not weakness, truth. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it as though it had always belonged there. From the doorway, unseen, Alpha King Vialric watched. He did not interrupt. He did not speak. He only closed his eyes, because at last he recognized what had taken him a lifetime to understand. This was love without power, without bargaining, without crowns. Later that day, the Alpha King gave the order. Preparations began quietly at first, then with urgency. Whispers filled the palace. Confusion spread. Disbelief followed. But Elyndar heard none of it. That night, as candles burned low and the palace slept, the prince lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart heavy. Because he had found true love, and he was no longer sure how much longer the lie could survive it. Chapter 9. The kingdom awoke to celebration and truth. By morning, the palace bells rang, not for mourning, but for revelation. Word spread faster than fire through dry grass. The prince had never been sick. The weakness had been a test. The bed, the pallor, the helplessness, carefully staged. Shock rippled through the court. Some laughed in disbelief. Some cursed in humiliation. Others fell silent, realizing too late what they had revealed about themselves. And then came the second blow. Prince Elyndar Nightcrown married the Omega servant, Isyra Emberfall. The palace that once ignored her now whispered her name with awe and outrage in equal measure. Servants stared, nobles recoiled. The ladies who had fled lowered their eyes in shame. The ceremony was grand, perfect, historic. But Isyra stood at the altar feeling none of it. She smiled when required. She spoke the vows clearly. Her hands did not tremble. Yet, inside, something fragile was splintering. Because love, her love, had been weighed, measured, and tested without her knowing. He had watched her choose him believing he was dying. He had listened to her vow devotion, believing she was choosing loss. And all the while, he had known the truth. When the final words were spoken, the bond sealed, the kingdom erupted in applause. Isyra did not look at the crowd. She looked at her husband, at the man she loved, at the man who had deceived her. That night, the palace waited for celebration, but behind closed doors, silence fell. Isyra removed her wedding adornments slowly, carefully, like someone handling something already broken. Elyndar reached for her. She stepped back. The distance between them was no longer measured in status or class, but in trust. The marriage was complete, but love, once freely given, now stood wounded. And the night that was meant to unite them ended with both lying awake, on opposite sides of a truth neither knew how to heal. End of Book 1.
Thank you for staying till the end. Would you like to see the book 2 of this story? Drop your comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us.